Hey everyone, it's Lisa here. Welcome to my channel and thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to be doing something slightly different. I'm going to be having a bit of a heart-to-heart video. As of tomorrow, my husband and I will have been in Amsterdam for 1 month, which is just so crazy because I feel like so much has happened in our lives in a span of 4 weeks. So, in preparation for this video, I came up with a few different topics. These are questions that our friends and family have asked us during our catch-ups, and also some questions that I think are quite important for any person who's thinking of relocating during the pandemic. So I've written it on my laptop next to me. If I look away from the camera, that's what I'm doing. I just don't want to forget anything. The first question that a lot of people asked us is, how has the pandemic affected our relocation journey? That's quite a big question to answer. The pandemic has affected our relocation journey in both obvious and subtle ways. For instance, before my husband and I said yes to the opportunity to come to the Netherlands, we were like, well, we've never been to the Netherlands. We should probably book a trip and go visit Amsterdam before we make a decision to relocate there. It all got cancelled because of the pandemic, and the Australian government also shut down all the international borders.
A travel ban will be placed on all non-residents, non-Australian citizens coming to Australia.
Don't plan on jetting off overseas before Christmas.
I do sadly think that in terms of open tourist-related travel in or out of Australia, that remains quite some distance off.
What it really meant was that we had to make a decision to come to Amsterdam without having been here before. The other major difference that the pandemic brought upon us was that there were more administrative hoops to jump through. Coming from Australia, you actually have to apply for an exemption in order to leave the country. I actually spoke about this in more detail in a previous video I did, which I will link here or here. In that old video that I mentioned, I speak a bit about how we only got our permission to leave the country and also our flight tickets sorted about 2 weeks before our departure date, which under normal circumstances is absolutely crazy, but in the pandemic world, that's just the way it is. At least it is the case if you come from Australia. Another thing that the pandemic made a little bit more difficult was the lack of job security around the world. So in order for us both to come here, I actually had to give up my day job in Australia. That was a decision that I made and that I eventually felt quite comfortable with. But because of the pandemic, my husband and I weighed up those pros and cons of me leaving my day job a lot more than we normally would have. We also got a lot of different reactions from our family and friends when we told them the news. A lot of our family and friends were mildly horrified as to why we would decide to come to Europe, where things were just sort of looking like they were spiraling out of control, when we had a very safe and secure and happy life in Australia. I think pre-pandemic world, our family and friends would probably have been unanimously excited and happy for us. We had to reassure our family and friends a lot more than I think we otherwise would have had to. Finally, I think the main difference about relocating during a pandemic is that the pandemic has kind of made it impossible to plan your life beyond the next few weeks, let alone the next few months or even year. Just as an example, in the lead up to our departure date, the COVID cases in the Netherlands were around the 2,000 to 3,000 mark, I believe. All the bars and restaurants were open, people were working in the office, people were traveling overseas. When we arrived, about 1 week later, there was a partial lockdown in place. There were 8,000 plus daily COVID cases. Bars and restaurants were closed. People had to work from home as much as possible. Overseas travel was not advised. You got to wear face masks everywhere. Life completely changed. So I'm talking about a difference of 1 to 2 weeks where things went from normal to shut down. The other question I thought I would touch on is whether or not we regret our decision to come here during a worldwide pandemic. The short answer to this question is no. As far as I can tell, I don't regret coming here. My husband doesn't regret coming here. The reason why I think we've still been able to really enjoy our life here is that every single simple activity that we do still feels so new and so novel. Whether that be taking a walk down the street, going to the grocery store, everything's in Dutch, there are products there that we've never seen before, taking our bike on the street. I think we've both just actively chosen to see the adventure in the simplest tasks possible, and that's something we've actively tried to do. So now I thought I would also touch on the biggest challenges about moving here. You watch a lot of expat videos, they say top 10 things about moving to a new country and becoming an expat, and the number one thing that they'll say is go meet new people, go join meetup groups, go join this, go join a wine club. Actually, that advice just doesn't apply in a pandemic world anymore, which really sucks. So I think the biggest challenge for us has been the ability to make new friends and meet new people.
So, do you like stuff?
I think meeting new people is a very crucial part of settling into your new country and your new home, and unfortunately we just haven't gotten to that stage yet. Again, coming from Australia, because the cases were so low, I just don't feel comfortable with socializing with people just yet. I'd rather just wait and have a nice catch up when things feel a bit safer. I came up with 4 questions that I think any expat who wants to relocate during the pandemic should ask him or herself before they come over. These are questions that are obviously based on my own personal experience, but hopefully there are some things that might help you as I go through them. The first question I think you should really be asking yourself is, will you have a job here? And or will you have enough savings to live comfortably here? Maybe that sounds very obvious, but I say this because a lot of people on the Facebook groups that I'm a part of, I've seen some posts of people who will say, I've just arrived here, I don't have a job, I was banking on the fact that I could get a hospitality job, but now all the restaurants are closed and I don't have any money, I can't pay my rent. I'm not exaggerating, like I have seen posts like that, and they can't get back home because obviously an air ticket is really expensive. It's more important than ever right now to think about your job situation, your financial situation before coming here. The job market is not good in the Netherlands and Europe, and probably worldwide, I would say. So, please have a contingency plan. Make sure you have enough savings before coming here if you're planning to find a job when you arrive. The second thing I think you should ask yourself is, will you be okay with not being able to travel in the foreseeable future? Unfortunately, I don't think, at least in Europe, you're going to be able to travel anytime soon. I think my biggest tip is to not just think about what your life might be like in the next 3 to 6 months, but even what your life will be like in the next 12 to 18 months. Maybe that sounds a bit extreme, but I'm really going with the whole worst case scenario planning here. Think about your motivations for coming here. Are you just here to travel every weekend and live that Instagram life? Or are you going to be okay with living here, living that local day-to-day life for at least a 6-month period, potentially for longer, because we don't know what's going to happen in the next year, unfortunately. Another question I think is quite important to ask is, what are your health needs, and are you prepared to get sick in an unfamiliar country and be taken care of by an unfamiliar health system? A lot of my own personal values are coming through this question. In Europe, we are going through a second wave. The hospitals and the health system is literally at breaking point, or it is at least approaching breaking point. For me, I feel like the main questions I'd be asking myself are, what's the COVID situation like in the new country compared to my home country? And is the danger level at a level that you are comfortable with? If you fall sick with COVID or a non-COVID related illness, Will you have any support? Will there be anyone who can take care of you? If you get sick and you can't work for some time, will you have enough savings to tide you over? Like, these are some of the questions that I thought about before I came here, because I knew that by coming here I was taking a bigger risk with my health compared to if I had just stayed in Australia, where the COVID cases are very low. I'm not just talking about catching COVID, I'm talking about the fact that you may not be able to access the hospital or get medical attention as easily as you might have otherwise. The final question that I think any expat probably would have had to think about before the pandemic, but probably needs to think about more than ever now, is, am I prepared to not get back home as easily as before? There are astronomical costs involved with buying a flight ticket. It's very difficult to secure a flight ticket home at the moment as well. And there's mandatory quarantine. It has to be an emergency for us to go back at this point in time. That was quite a difficult realization for us both to make. Being an expat usually is quite difficult. It does mean you miss out on lots of special moments with your family and friends. You can't be there for people in the way that you want to be there for people. During a pandemic, it's extra hard. There's just this like added barrier between yourself and your family and friends. Actually, before I came here, a very good friend of mine, who I would say is like a seasoned expat, she gave me some advice and she said, you can't make any promises to anyone. And I don't think when she gave that advice, she had the pandemic at the back of her mind, but I think that piece of advice rings particularly true during a pandemic. You can't promise people that you'll be back by Christmas. You can't promise people that you'll be there for their birthday. You just don't know what the world is going to be like in the next few months or even year. You don't know whether you can actually practically and financially afford to go back home. I think it's a reality that the sooner you face up to, the easier it will become when those situations do come up later on. So that's all I had. I hope that was somewhat helpful, and please remember that this is within the frame of my experience and within the parameters of what is important to me. You may think differently. There is really no real right or wrong way to relocate, but I feel like it's very important, I guess, to take off your rose-colored glasses and be mentally prepared for any uphill battles that you might need to face when you do relocate to a whole new country. A lot of the advice that you'll find in blogs or YouTube videos, they won't apply to you because they were made during a time when the pandemic did not exist. But I hope that by thinking about these questions before you decide whether or not to relocate will help make that relocation journey easier, or maybe it will help you decide that relocating at the moment is not the right time for you. I'm going to wrap up the video now. If you have any other tips, please leave a comment down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe and click the little bell button next to the subscribe button as well. I'm releasing videos on a weekly basis every Saturday, so if you click the bell button, you won't miss out on any new videos. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.